At BigTent USA, we are steadfast in our commitment to defending our democratic values, the Constitution, and the rule of law. Our goal is to empower you with facts, guidance, and calls to action so you can become a stronger, more effective advocate. So we are so honored today to welcome two fabulous women to BigTent, Rachel Janfaza and the one and only Jane Fonda. Before I introduce Jane and Rachel, I want to add just a brief personal note about my first meeting with Jane Fonda. I was in Los Angeles on April 29th, 2017, a day of international climate protests. I was with my activist 10-year-old granddaughter, who was my favorite partner in protesting. And we followed the ever-fierce Jane Fonda up the Pacific Coast Highway to protest at the Tesoro oil refinery, and barely escaped getting arrested by the Los Angeles Police Department. So this is a day in my granddaughter's life that she will never forget. And now she refers to it as the day her grandmother almost got arrested with Jane Fonda. Jane Fonda is a two-time Academy Award-winning actor, producer, author, activist, and fitness guru. Her career has spanned over 50 years, accumulating a body of film work that includes more than 50 films and a significant contributions to political causes such as women's rights, Native Americans' rights, and environmental protection. Fonda led the charge on the climate emergency via Fire Drill Fridays, the national movement to protest government inaction on climate change, which she started in October 2019 in partnership with Greenpeace USA. In 2022, she launched the Jane Fonda Climate PAC, focused on defeating political allies of the fossil fuel industry. Her latest book, What Can I Do? My Path from Climate Despair to Action, details her personal journey with the movement and provides solutions for communities to combat the climate crisis. Rachel Janfaza is the founder of the Up and Up, a newsletter about young voters, and also a consultant on youth civic engagement and media strategy. A member of Generation Z, Rachel is laser focused on the cohort's civic attitude and has convened listening sessions with hundreds of young people across the country. Her written work has been featured in the New York Times, on CNN, the Free Press, Glamour, Political Magazine, Teen Vogue, Vogue, Elle, Cosmo, and Bustle. So Jane and Rachel, thank you so much for coming to BigTent USA. And with that, I turn it over to both of you.
Thank you so much, Gail. And what an honor it is to be here tonight with a true icon, Jane Fonda. Thank you, BigTent, for inviting me to moderate this conversation. And we are all here to learn more about Jane's incredible work, yes, as an actress, but as an activist for decades. So I'm going to get right to the woman of the hour, Jane. You've been an activist across different issues close to your heart for years. I'm curious when and why you started focusing on climate advocacy, and I'm hoping you could tell us a little bit about your journey to becoming a climate activist.
Thank you. Thanks, Rachel. And thank you, BigTent, for having me. I'm honored to be here, and I really support what you're doing because we need a big tent. Got to have a lot of people involved in this fight. Well, like I'm sure many of the young people on this call, I was a tomboy, I still am, and I love nature. I was always outside. I was born in 1937 when there were only 2 billion people on Earth, so there was a lot more nature. And so I have fought for environmental things all my life, along with other things. But it was Greta Thunberg's revolution. It was what she unleashed in 2019 across the world. It was the largest global demonstration in world history. And I realized I'm not doing enough. I have a platform and I'm not doing enough. And on top of that, it was about 110 degrees in Hollywood, in Los Angeles. I went outside, the sky was orange. It was when the worst fires were burning in California. And this was 2019. And then I read birds were falling dead out of the sky over New Mexico and Texas because they were having to fly over the desert because of the fires. They couldn't fly over the coast where there was food and water. And that's when I decided, okay, that's it. I'm gonna commit myself and do this full time. And this is what my focus is going to be. And that's when I called Annie Leonard, and we started with Fire Drill Friday together with Greenpeace. And that's how it happened.
Wow, that's incredible. So we'll get into the specifics of your PAC now and the work that you're doing. But at the macro level, thinking about the country and the crises that are affecting our country today, what do you see as the biggest threats to our country currently?
We're facing two crises, climate and democracy, and they are totally interconnected and they have to be solved together. And it's for both of them, it's now or never. You can't have a healthy climate if you don't have democracy. And we're seeing that right now. One of the reasons that the Trump administration is chipping away at democracy in this country is he's trying to protect the fossil fuel industry, which is what's giving him the money. It undergirds our economy, and we have to get out from under that. And so they don't want us to protest. They don't want us to speak out. And so democracy is being chipped away in order to prevent us from doing something about the causes of the climate crisis. And you can't have a stable democracy unless you have a stable climate. You know, trillions and trillions of dollars are being spent on these extreme weather events. And when they start to happen, as they're beginning to now, one right after the other, it's hard for an economy to deal with that and to recover. So these are two existential crises that have to be dealt with together.
Yeah. So thinking about climate specifically, can you tell us a little bit about your PAC for those in the audience who might not be familiar? And why have you chosen to prioritize down ballot races as a focus of your PAC's work?
I've never worked with an electoral strategy before. And a lot of the big green groups don't, for all kinds. You know, we thought in the beginning, if we say what's really happening, if we communicate what science is saying, people are going to they're going to rise up and do something about it. This is what Greta was thinking. Well, you know, Greta, she's amazingly inspirational, Greta. She couldn't believe because she's a science nerd on the spectrum, so laser focused. And she said, what I'm reading, what I'm learning, this thing about climate, it can't be true, because if it was true, all the adults in my life would be dropping everything that they're doing, and this is all anybody would focus on, right? I mean, our house is on fire. You can't just deal with business as usual. And I can't remember why I brought that into the story, but at any rate, you know, Fire Drill Friday was a protest, and it was very successful. It was civil disobedience. It eventually involved thousands of people, and we went online during the COVID crisis, and we had 10 million people following us online, and we developed a lot of activists. And when it was all over, or at least at the end of that period, we looked at each other. I have a small cadre of mentors, of which Annie Leonard is one. And we realized, you know, with all of this work and the decades of protests, we don't have the policies that are commensurate with what science is asking. We don't have the legislation. The closest we came was a bill called Build Back Better. I don't know if you remember that. So I'm just going to tell you what happened with that. The Build Back Better bill was pretty much, it came close to the Green New Deal. A moderate Democrat in Texas named Henry Cuellar rounded up a few of his Democratic cohorts and persuaded Nancy Pelosi to remove the most important provision that was in the Build Back Better bill, ending fossil fuel subsidies, the $20 billion that we taxpayers give the fossil fuel industries with their trillions of dollars of profits every year. We give them $20 billion. people who are having their medical care and their food stamps and their voting rights taken away, but you're being required to pay money to the fossil fuel industry. So, and we realized that the reason that this was true was because of people like Henry Cuellar. He persuaded her to take that out. By the way, he's the only anti-choice Democrat in Texas, and Nancy Pelosi was trying to, was protecting him. There was a wonderful candidate, Jessica Cisneros, a young Hispanic woman who ran against him.
I remember I wrote about her at the time.
She almost won. She lost by like 800 votes. This is the problem, guys. This is the problem. There are really good people out there that are brave enough to stand up to the fossil fuel industry, and they don't get elected. The Henry Cuellars, who take tens of millions of dollars. Well, I don't know how much he takes, but he gets money from the fossil fuel industry. This is the problem. They get bought off by the fossil fuel industry. So we said to each other, okay, we're going to start a PAC. We're going to support candidates who have shown publicly that they're brave enough to stand up against the fossil fuel industry and the petrochemical industry and really work for their constituents and not for corporations. And because we have a lot of contacts on the ground, grassroots organizations all across the country, we do a lot of research on the ground. We find out who the candidates are. We have to be sure that they can win. This is not a protest PAC. We're in it to win it. We want to know, could supporting them maybe flip the legislature? Do they live in a community? There are so many that I could name where you're surrounded by industry, you're dying from the fumes, Commerce City just next to Denver. Industry all around, and not one elected official will help them. Air monitoring, moving industry or whatever, nobody. So we focus a lot on those kind of communities, trying to get elected officials who will be responsive to their needs. We don't just give money to candidates, we help them with earned media, with strategy, with language around climate and so forth. And none of us had ever done anything like this before. And it turned out it's working. We have more candidates coming to us than we can handle. We try to be strategic about it. We primary candidates. Not all Democrats are the same. There's a Jessica Cisneros and then there's a Henry Cuellar. You want to support the ones that are brave, and they're usually young. And we're not specifically going out for women. Most of the candidates are women. Women are definitely in the leadership of the climate movement. And they're great. We supported, and this is a candidate that we have to protect when they redistrict, if they redistrict in Texas. Greg Casar from Austin, Texas. He's a labor organizer. He's the greatest guy. He got elected to Congress. He's now the head of the chair of the Progressive Caucus. And they're going to try to redistrict him out of office. But that's the kind of candidate that we support.
Yeah. And so when thinking about elections, we oftentimes only think about the big presidential election years, but there are elections this year too. Are there specific races that you are focused on right now, either this year or for 2026 in the midterms?
Yeah, I think it's really important for people to realize that right now you can't do much on the federal level. Hopefully next year we'll take back the House. That's going to be very hard. But the real climate work is being done in cities and states all over the country. And that's where we focus. We are what we call down ballot: governors, mayors, city councils, state legislators, county executives, school boards, public utility boards. There are so many places where we can make a huge difference in terms of climate on the local and state level. The Republicans knew that. Remember the Tea Party? This was a few decades ago with Koch brother money under the radar. They just went across the country and took over state legislatures, governors, mayors, before the Democrats woke up and said, wait a minute, this is where the power is right now. And we have to protest, but we have to realize that ultimately we need power. We have to take back power. And we can do that by electing people to office. It's also creating a firewall against what Trump is trying to do, to protect a lot of the climate work that's being done locally. It's also building a bench, a proper progressive bench for the Democratic Party. I'm not good with names. I mean, this is supposed to be, this is what they call an off year. It's not an off year to Jane Pack. Every year we have like 46 campaigns this year. We've already won 6 of them. We have a lot of focus on Virginia, and Pennsylvania. Anyway,
And are there specific factors that help you choose which candidates you're going to support that help your candidate stand out from the rest of the pack?
well, again, they have to have done something publicly that to stand up against fossil fuels. They have to not have taken money from the fossil fuel or petrochemical industry. They we give them, we do a lot of research on our candidates. We talk to a lot of people locally, and then we give them a very, very long questionnaire that they have to fill out. And that's where we get a sense of who they are, what they are, how strong are their beliefs, will they be really brave, and all of that.
Yeah, and I know for those who are curious too, you can see that all on the Jane Pack website, I believe, as well. So
You go to our website, janepack.com, and you'll see who we've endorsed in the past. And I just sent a grant to Mom Donnie because I think that he's the kind of candidate we need.
So thinking back across your career and the long arc of activism that you've had, how is your activism received in Hollywood and in that aspect of your life? And how do you blend and mesh those two worlds together?
Well, I mean, there was a time I have been really not popular in my life. There was a time when it was hard for me to get a job, and things were tough. My home was broken into, and my bank account was first time a civilian bank account was taken by the CIA. All kinds of things were done. But see, I wasn't alone. I was part of a movement. And I knew that what I was doing was right in the effort to end the Vietnam War. And so, in time, a lot of them died. I'm old, but I haven't died. I'm still around. And so that helps. And also in time, especially when McNamara said it was the wrong war, we made a mistake and apologized. More and more people realized that it was a bad war. We should never have gone into that war. So I've become popular now. It feels much better. But I didn't die before, so I'm not afraid of being unpopular again. Anyway, I'm trying to remember what the question was. Remind me what the question was?
How do you blend your life as an actress, but also as an activist? And has there been collaboration between other people from your life in Hollywood who you have advocated with or worked alongside?
Yeah, there's a lot of activism in Hollywood. I became an activist in 1970. I was 32 years old. See, I haven't been an activist all my life. And I'm kind of glad about that because I know what it feels like pre-activism, and then AA, after activism. And, I lived a pretty vacant, hedonistic life, very frankly. I kind of knew somewhere in my gut, once you know something, you have to act on it. Otherwise, you become part of the problem. So I just remained ignorant. I didn't know. But when I was forced to see the truth, I couldn't turn away. And then in 70, when I came back, I used to live in France. I came back here to be an activist, and I spent a lot of time in Detroit because I wanted to learn organizing from the UAW, United Auto Workers, union organizers. And I became very close to a Black lawyer, and he had created the League of Black Revolutionary Lawyers. And he would send me out with these union organizers and everything. And then one day I said to him, I'm going to quit Hollywood. I don't want to act anymore. It separates me from the people that I'm trying to reach. I want to become an organizer. And he looked at me, he said, Fonda, the movement has hundreds of organizers. We don't have movie stars. You have to stay in the business. You have to go back to Hollywood and you have to own your career. Own it. Make it something that expresses you that you can be proud of. And so I did. My first movie was 9 to 5 that I produced with my partner, Bruce Gilbert. And than 9 to 5. It was a comedy, but it was about working women and what's done to them. I don't know. Anyway, a lot of movies. So I express my activism through my movies. At 88, you don't get hired a lot. So I'm still trying to work. I really want to work. And hopefully I can continue to do that. But I do try to organize my fellows in Hollywood, which is why I said what I said when I received it's called the Life Achievement Award from the Screen Actors Guild. And I said, this is our chance to prove we're as brave as the people in the documentaries that we see that stood up during the civil rights movement against the dogs and the bullies and the hoses and all the people in history that have stood up that we've seen in documentaries and wondered, would I be able to be that brave? We have a chance now.
Right. And you're doing it. Looking at your work, I know I focus on youth culture and youth politics and activism, and you work very closely with young activists. And I think, having these intergenerational conversations is so important. And I'm really glad we're able to have it today. And I'm curious how has your experience been working with and learning from young activists as well? You mentioned Greta Thunberg at the beginning of the call. Are there any anecdotes or experiences that you could tell us about from the past few years of your activism working alongside some of these youth climate activists?
I've spent a lot of time with youth climate activists, and I can't help but think, what was I like at that age? I wasn't anything like these young people, and I just so admire them so much. They're so smart, and they've done their homework, and they're brave, and the one that I know the best, and maybe you've heard of her, her name is Nayeli Cobo, and her family came from Mexico. She's been here for a long time. Her mother's a community organizer. And when she was 9, she lived in Downey, California. An oil company, Allen Co. is the name of the company, drilled a well across the street from her apartment building. And she started getting nosebleeds. Her nosebleeds were so bad, she had to sleep sitting up so she wouldn't drown in her blood. She got very, very, very sick. And then they began to realize that all over the neighborhood, people were getting sick. And she realized it's because of the oil. And so, with her mother's help, she began to organize her community. And long story short, she won. They won. The well closed up and they went away. And, unfortunately, the health damage didn't go away. She got cancer. She had to have all of her reproductive organs removed at 20. And she's still, you can tell she's not 100%, but she's so eloquent. And, she was our secret weapon. We had a huge fight against the oil companies in California. We were the only oil producing state that had no setbacks, meaning no oil wells can be right inside communities. That's why these people were getting so sick. And we had to raise like $200 million. We didn't. We beat them before. And a lot of the reason we beat them is because of Nayeli, because people heard her stories and that was it. And I think that I did what I did in DC with Greenpeace called Fire Drill Fridays, because I read that Greta, at one point, she said, we're fighting for our futures. Where are the old people to help us, to stand next to us? We didn't create this problem. And boy, that got me off my ass.
Yeah. And the youth climate activism space has changed a lot over the course of the past 5 years. And in the listening sessions that I hold with young people, I often hear a lot of anxiety and stress about climate change. And yet it oftentimes feels like there's little that people can do when there's so much political noise and the politics of it all are making it hard for young people to speak up. What advice do you have for them? For the ones who are maybe less brave in the immediate, or maybe they just need to find their courage.
We all have to understand we're the last generation on planet Earth that can do something about the climate. After that, it's going to be too late. And so we have to do everything we can. I understand why people are scared, especially now. This is not easy. It's very different than it was before Trump. And there are some of us, I'm one of them, you call it foolhardy. I'm always trying to test myself. Am I brave enough? Will it make a difference? Am I brave enough? Can I do this? So I'll push myself, but not everybody's that way. And there are lots of things you can do without ever leaving your house. The letter writing, the phone calling, I mean, it's kind of amazing what it matters. Believe me, I know that this is important. When I don't have time to go into the story about what happened during the Vietnam War, but writing letters and making calls to elected officials is more important than you can ever imagine. Or you can work for candidates that really light your fire. Knock on doors for them, help them raise money, do phone banking and letter writing. There's a lot of things you can do that won't put you in danger of being arrested or something like that.
Yeah.
I think it's very important also for everybody, but especially young people who want to get into this climate activism space, is to know the issue. It's not because I wrote the book, but what can I do? My Path from Climate Despair to Action is a really very useful book. It's very clear, very succinct, and very specific. So What Can I Do by Jane Fonda? That's a good book. And then a book that really did a lot for me by Naomi Klein. If you don't know her writing, all of us should be aware of Naomi Klein's writing. She's the best. It's called On Fire, a brief case for the Green New Deal. I think it's something like that, but on fire are the words that you have to know. So read the books, become familiar with what science is saying and what kind of organizing is happening, so that when you do whatever you're going to do, you can do it backed up. You don't have to be an expert, but know enough so that you can justify what you're doing if somebody questions it.
Definitely. So we're going to shift gears into the questions that have come in from the BigTent community over the week and right now as well. So thinking about activism in challenging environments, kind of along the lines of what we were discussing, can you suggest ways that this is something that someone asked, can you suggest ways to be an activist in a small town? They're worried that their views may alienate their neighbors.
Yeah. It's challenging, and I understand the fear. But, everybody, we should all be aware of the fact that protest is our constitutionally guaranteed right. We have a right to protest. We have a right to vote. That's what makes democracy a democracy. So this is not radical. This is what's in our Constitution. As I said, learn the issue so that you can argue it to people who don't agree with you. Find out whether it's the local sports team, churches, unions, teachers, caregivers. Find out in your small rural community who the kindred spirits are and start to meet with them, get together, build up your strength, reach out and find other people. Don't just start small. And the people that don't agree with you, a lot of them, 78 million people voted for Trump. They're not all MAGA. A lot of them are just people who got so angry at the Democratic Party, they want to burn it all down. I get it. They can be won over because they're already hurting. They're starting to hurt, and the worst hasn't even kicked in yet. So these are people that are going to be ripe to hearing new ideas. So think about what your ideas are. What is the future you would like to see that is not going to happen as long as Trump is president and as long as we have our burning fossil fuels and heating up our planet? Describe the vision. Jobs for everyone, clean air, clean water, good health, jobs that can allow you to own a home and send kids to college. And, we have to project a beckoning vision of what we're fighting for. And how, when I first became an activist, I was working within the military. I was organizing active duty servicemen, and they were all men at that time. The anti-war movement, the part of it that was working with soldiers, it was called the GI movement. There were coffee houses outside of military bases all over the country, run by movement people, almost always women. And there was one in Killeen, Texas, outside of Fort Hood. Her name was Terry Davis. And I was totally wet at I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have any way to describe it. I just knew that I wanted to be part of the anti-war movement. And they were going to send me onto the base to distribute leaflets, and I was probably going to be arrested. And it was the way that she treated me. She saw me, not as a celebrity, but she really saw me. And she cared, and she asked how I felt and if there was a problem, or being with her was like descending into a warm bath. It was like looking through a keyhole at the world that you were fighting for. That's how we have to be. Not judgmental, not how could you have voted for him? No, with open hearts and empathy. The big tent, that's what you all are, the big tent. We have to make our tent big. So we have to realize everybody is good, but a lot of people have been fucked up and they need to heal. But that's all. They just need to heal. They're not bad people. And so let's help them heal with love and empathy and answers to their questions.
So another question from the community is asking about how Democrats and independents can gain back the rule of law and constitutional democratic principles. So I know you mentioned that protest is a constitutionally protected right. What guidance or advice do you have for the person asking this question?
Well, I think I've chosen the electoral strategy. I think by electing people to office who are brave and smart and understand that fossil fuels is a thing of the past and we have to phase that out and move on. And the moving on means health and safety and clean air and clean water and many, many, many more jobs that are well paying. We have to be sure that they're well paying. We have to protect unions. Unions are really important. But that's what I think, the electoral strategy. Another thing that we all have to be thinking about now is, like the roof of a house is held up with pillars, supports. So is the government. Trump's administration, like any other administration, is held up with pillars of support: military, media, professionals. There's all kinds of pillars. If we can crack those pillars, he'll collapse. So that's what that's why we were working inside the military during the Vietnam War. It's why it's great to work in churches. Churches played such a role in the anti-Vietnam War movement. It's why you get my point.
Thinking about the climate crisis and environmental action specifically. Someone from the community asked how to get the US media to cover the climate crisis every day.
Yeah. Where I am, they do. The LA Times or the New York Times covers the climate crisis. Great? No, but they cover it. They're starting to connect the dots. So if you live in a small town or a medium-sized town, write letters to the editor. Call them up. Get a group of people to go down to the editor's desk or to the newspaper and say, we want you to cover climate. Have a dialogue with them. Have a meeting with the editorial board, that kind of thing. Let them know that the people that they're writing their newspaper for want to know about the climate crisis and expect their newspaper to report on it.
Yeah, as a journalist too, I would add in that journalists love hearing ideas from community members as well. And so reaching out to specific writers is a way to get stories told all the time too.
Right. And maybe as you read, learning more about the climate, you'll get ideas that maybe you'll want to give to the newspaper and suggest to them.
Right. What small steps can people take in their day-to-day activities in their individual homes? So thinking more on a smaller level to help deter climate change.
Well, the main thing to know is this is a systemic problem, frankly. If we had a different economic system, it wouldn't have happened. Although I've been in socialist and communist countries, and they're even worse for the environment than capitalism is. But all of our economic systems, they're not sustainable. You can't have an economic system that is based on continual and perpetual growth that's sustainable. So our very economic system is the problem, one of the big problems. What was the question?
Just thinking about what people can do in their own home.
So it's systemic, it's huge. It requires a collective effort because it's a collective problem. That said, buying heat pumps to heat your home, if you can afford it, putting solar panels on your roof if you can afford it. In the 70s, I ran a children's camp and everything was off grid. We had a windmill, a generator that created power, photovoltaic cells, solar panels. And that was in the 70s when Jerry Brown was governor. We had tax breaks and we could do that. But, some people think that all you have to do is recycle and that's the problem. No. And the recycling in most American cities isn't real anyway. So we have to try to force manufacturers to not have a lot of plastic and stuff that's not recyclable. All the things that you've already heard, eat less meat, try to eat more plant-based diets. Turn the water off. When you're brushing your teeth, don't keep the water running. Turn lights off when you leave a room. Conserve energy, conserve water. We are running out of water. This is really water has become gold. So pay attention to that in your everyday life. Don't drive if you don't have to. Take a bike or walk. Don't fly unless you have to. Really think about flying. We have to cut back on all of that. But it's important when we talk to people who aren't yet part of the movement. We can't make it sound like it's all about giving up. That's when we get attacked. When Trump says they're all wanting you to give up your hamburgers and your cars and this, it can be joyful. It can be wonderful. It's not, being an activist is not like eating broccoli. You meet great people, you make friends, you make new friends. That's what I found. I met a whole different kind of human being when I became an activist. And those are my friends now. So you all know what to do in your home, but you got to get out of your home or stay in your home and use your phone or your computer to reach out. It can't just be an individual solution.
Thinking about your activism, you mentioned before the women that have been at the forefront of many of these movements. And someone from the community asked why you think there are more women who are activists than there are men. I don't know if you found that to be true in your time as an activist, but curious about the power of the women who have led many of these movements.
With few exceptions, the people who are real activists are people who have, for whatever reason at times, felt like outcasts, felt like they weren't really part of things. Women have never been in control. And so what the hell do we have to lose by overthrowing the current system, right? Nothing, we have nothing to lose. We have everything to gain. Number one. Number two, women, for all kinds of reasons, have always been better with change than men. We all our lives is about change, our bodies, having children, sending them off, having no children, periods. Our life is about change. Following husbands, that's less true than it was when I was growing up. But women just always moved around the country wherever their husbands were going to work, things like that. So it's built into us to roll with the punches and to be okay with change. Men are not good with change. When you get older, and you see, when a wife dies or there's a divorce and the woman leaves, husbands try to get remarried right away. They're not good on their own. Women leave and they thrive as they never have before. Oh, I mean, obviously there are exceptions. I'm generalizing. And women, especially women, as they get older, we get braver. You know, we're not on the market anymore. We don't have to deal with some guy that wants us to shrink ourselves down to a thimble so they won't be intimidated. You know, we're ready. We have nothing to lose. That's how I feel anyway.
We have more questions that have come in from the chat as we've been talking as well. So I'm going to read another one. What was your most gratifying experience as an activist?
Well, in many, many ways, my PAC is my most gratifying experience. I know in my deepest self that this electoral strategy is the right one. This is what has to happen. And when you know that what you're doing is the thing that has to happen, you don't get depressed.
Yeah. Okay, we have another question that says that the Democrats and leadership in the Democratic Party have a real problem with messaging.
Yeah.
This person said, we are not reaching enough people and addressing their broad concerns. The number one issue folks vote on is their pocketbook and the economy, and just the messaging issues there. Do you have thoughts on that or commentary on messaging in general and how sort of to respond to that lack of messaging?
I agree that the messaging is off, and it's because their hearts are off. You know, they got absorbed into this neo-colonial quicksand that they can't get out of. The Mamdani victory in New York, in Brooklyn, is very important to look at. This is what has to happen. And look how scared the Democratic establishment is, just terrified. And I'd love to know in the chat what you younger people think. I don't think young people are going to vote for any president that can't dialogue about Gaza, that can't talk about it. One thing we have to do is fight to make it clear that you can love Israel and hate genocide. That doesn't make you anti-Semitic. I've been to Israel many, many times. But what's happening has to be called out for what it is. And any president that won't say that any president, any candidate that is so scared of AIPAC, the very, 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 very powerful Jewish organization that can change political careers, will not get elected because young people won't vote. So that's one important thing. I have no idea. I cannot say who I think will be a good presidential candidate, but I know that we have to take back first we have to take back the House.
Okay, thinking more about your own personal practices and resilience, do you have a spiritual practice at all, or is there a role that spirituality plays in your activist life?
I meditate and I pray. I believe in the power of prayer, and I believe that I want to protect the Christian religion from Christian nationalism. So I'm looking for bodies in the Christian movement that will stand up for the Pope's encyclical, Francis' encyclical that was so beautiful. People who will stand up and say, this is not what Jesus was talking about. We have to be true Christians and open our hearts to every other religion as well. I mean, you know, anyway, we don't have time to go into all that, but I do have a practice. I'm a spiritual person, and I think working in churches to encourage progressivism in the churches and to oppose Christian nationalism is a great thing to do.
Yeah. And along the lines of that as well, and this is, I think this can be a central theme that we focus on in our last little bit of time together, but there's been many, many questions in the chat about how you find hope and what gives you hope. So I'm hoping we can chat about that for a bit of time.
What gives me hope is, you know, Greta, as usual, Greta said, everybody goes looking for hope. Look for action and hope will come. I know that this is true. I was so depressed in 2019 because I knew I wasn't doing enough. Given that I have the platform that I have and I wasn't really using it, The minute I started to use it, depression went away. So activism is good for hope. And the young people that I work with and that I see give me tremendous hope. And I believe in the basic goodness of people. I think that when we bring out the goodness in people and we connect them, that's what is going to win.
Yeah. And of course, you have a massive platform, and so many people will listen to the words that you share. For people who don't necessarily have that big of a platform, I know you mentioned, writing letters or calling representatives and elected officials, but are there other action items that you would point to that they can take so that they can continue to fight and push in the ways that you have as well, even without that big audience?
Yeah, go on to the janepack.com website. See who the candidates are that may be near where you live and support them. You can support them by letter writing. You can support them by canvassing, which, by the way, is an incredible thing. I know it's scary to people, knocking on doors of people you don't know. I was so scared. And it's funny because people don't know who I am when I do it, unless I'm, made up and dressed up and everything, if there are cameras around. But usually people have no idea who I am because, if somebody shows up in a context that you never would expect them to be, they don't know. And so you hear, even though you're only on the doorstep for 3 or 4, maybe 5, 6 minutes, you learn a lot. And it's very, very interesting. And it makes such a difference. So you can do things like that. Campaigns need you. Down ballot campaigns, they don't get the money, they don't get the volunteers, they don't get the media. So any way that any of you can help our down ballot candidates get that money, media, volunteers, that's what really is going to matter, I think.
We've had a few people asking about the California redistricting strategy, and as a California resident, how you feel about that effort.
I'm in favor of him doing that. We have to fight to protect our democracy. We're going to lose if Texas goes ahead and claims and wins 5 congressional seats, and we don't do the same. We're going to lose it. So we have to do the same. I don't like it, but we're going to do it.
Yeah. Okay. We also, just so we have a young 16-year-old in the chat who's joining from Turkey. And she talked about how in recent years, there have been large forest fires in the country that have affected them deeply. So she wanted to let you know that she started her own climate activism organization called Youth Climate Voice. So that is a comment that has come through in the chat as well.
Thank her very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. And thinking as well about both, we've spoken a lot about climate, and at the start you mentioned that the 2 biggest threats that you see are climate and democracy. What makes you hopeful when it comes to democracy in particular?
What? You say that again?
Sorry, what makes you hopeful with regard to democracy in particular?
I think when we help people realize what is at risk now, the right to vote. How many people gave their lives for that? The right to vote, the right to protest. The other day, somebody who had arranged a phone call for a group of people that were part of an organization that were planning a protest. He went to jail he's been sentenced to jail for 5 years. He didn't go to the protest, he wasn't part of it, he just arranged a phone call. This is anti-democratic. So the more we can fight against that, fight for our right to protest. This is what we need to do. We can't lose our democracy. That's what the PAC is about. We have to vote for people that will defend our democracy. Voting. So many young people don't vote anymore. And we have to get people back to voting. I know my granddaughter wouldn't vote because Biden was sending weapons to Gaza. I get it. But I'm older than she is. And so I know what happens when you want to be pure. Hey, guys, it's too late. This is not about pure. This is about saving ourselves. And, just look back at, well, maybe some of you are too young, but in 2000, the election, Bush against Al Gore. It's very possible that Al Gore actually won, but he didn't fight. and Bush won. And one of the reasons is because so many young people, including my children, voted for Ralph Nader. And I understand. I mean, I love Ralph Nader. But look what we got. The world would be a different place if Al Gore had won. We would not be facing any of these problems if Al Gore had won. So this is what's at stake. And you know, my daughter, this was last year, my granddaughter, and I said, you've got to vote for Biden because the alternative is fascism. And she said, we're already fascist, which, you know, that shows that she and other young people don't quite understand yet about government and civics. Even now, with all Trump has done, we're on the edge of fascism, but we're not fascist yet. That's what we have to fight against, because once it slips over into fascism, we're not going to be able to do a lot of things. So we have to work fast and deep and hard and know that history will thank us, because this is the last generation that can do it.
I do want to end early so Jane can go. And I just want to say there was so much love and appreciation for you in the chat, Jane. And Rachel, you just did a fabulous job moderating and handling the multitude of questions. And we are so grateful to both of you. And Jane, I think you inspired all of us. And at Big Tent USA, we will continue to fight. We will not back down. And we are with you in this. So thank you for setting such a good example for all of us. And everyone for coming to Big Tent tonight. We're so grateful to have you with us. Rachel, you're the best. Everyone have a great night, and we'll see you again under the tent. Good night, everyone.
Thanks, Kitty. Thanks, Gail. Thanks.